You are listening to the Emulsion podcast, a show that informs and inspires the restaurant industry to work, live, and create better. My name is Justin Khanna. I'm a chef and media producer with almost 10 years of experience in award-winning restaurants all over the world. I created this show as a way to give back, to inspire the next generation, and help you progress your career. The Emulsion podcast is sponsored by you folks, and Patreon is where that happens. If you're here as a return listener and enjoyed the episode you just came from and happen to want to support more episodes, visit patreon.com/Justin Khanna. I'd really appreciate it if you can. I totally understand if you can't. Free ways you can support this show include leaving a like or comment on this episode, filling up all 5 stars on iTunes so more people can find us, or simply sharing an episode with a friend. This is an interview episode. If you missed out on asking your burning question to today's guest, that's probably because you aren't following me on Instagram or Twitter. I use the handy dandy question feature in my Instagram stories, and I also start a thread for each guest on Twitter. So between the two of those, that's the best way to take advantage of the access I hope to bring you with this show and all of the interviews I do. Let's learn a little bit more about today's interviewee, shall we?
I think you change in life until the day you die. And for me, I changed so rapidly. I was first like this, people knew me as this cook, the chef, and then now he's an entrepreneur. What the hell is he doing? And it was so many people that questioned what I was doing, and as long as I believed I had genuine intentions, I just sort of ignored them. Yep. Which is hard now because I've lost some dear friends because I've got on this journey. But it's in hope that for them to understand that I want to build something that no one else has. And totally. For you to do that, you have to put in the work.
What is up, folks? It is truly my pleasure to welcome you to another episode of the Emulsion podcast. Today, my guest is Mike Truong, owner of Faint Media. He is a Portland-based entrepreneur. He also works in New York for a little bit. He used to work at Momofuku Co. as a chef. He has experience in horticulture, which we definitely talk about in this interview. But rewinding it for a quick second, a story of how this interview came to be. I told myself when I went to the Feast Portland Festival back in September, the whole trip would be worth it if I get one podcast interview out of the whole trip. I went with nothing scheduled, nothing on the calendar, and so I did my best to keep an open mind while I was at the festival itself and trying to network as best as I could. So I was at this cocktail hour for the Media Pass people, and the plan was they were going to put us all on a bus and take us to the first public event, and we would get there an hour early, and we would get to sample all the food without the lines. It was going to be great. So we get on the bus, and it's like a full-on party bus inside of a yellow school bus. There's karaoke, and people are drinking and taking selfies. And for all of you that have been following me for a while, it's not really my scene. So I'm sitting in my seat quietly by myself. I'm probably on my phone. And there's this guy who is vlogging. He has a vlogging rig, and I vlog. So I'm sitting across from him, and I introduce myself, and we immediately start jamming. So I took my shot. I was like, hey, I'm here on a media pass for my podcast. Would you want to sit down for an interview after our breakfast event tomorrow? Long story short, he says yes. We hang out basically that whole night, and then we go to the breakfast event the next morning, which is at the Heathman Hotel. For those of you watching on YouTube, that is where the interview is set. They had a nice little lounge area where I just kind of set up shop and decided that's where we were going to be interviewing, because where I was on the road and I didn't have any other choice. So excuse the small bit of background noise. There was more breakfast things going on just one floor above us, but I think the mics did a pretty good job of rejecting some of that. So in this episode, we talk about how to combat burnout as a chef, why chefs should be thinking like media companies, my own personal philosophy about creating content, which I actually haven't shared in any other interview, which is definitely worth listening to. And then Mike has investment from Samsung. He basically has this crazy journey of how he went from cooking at his high school, his college's university, and goes beyond there. But I will, of course, let Mike tell that story. And then he also, of course, shares what it's like to change industries but still work with your old peers, which can absolutely be a little bit awkward, but also really motivating. And I gotta say, we get really philosophical in this episode. It's not normally the direction I go to, but again, I enjoyed it a lot. And before I forget, he is at Faint Mike on Instagram if you want to get in touch with him there or ask him any questions. But for now, please enjoy this conversation with Mike Truong. It's my first feast though, so I had no expectations. So everything's going to be exciting for me. But you're based out of here. Yeah. Right? And you grew up here. Yep. So how does that... Are you jaded about Portland? Do you feel like it's changed or kind of gone through this weird...
People talk about, the gentrification a lot in that. And I grew up in a part of Portland that was really ghetto. And I'm talking about... And it still is ghetto, that if you pass the street, you can see all the restaurants, and you pass it a bit, you'll see people riding lowriders, people bumping music, people hanging out in the backyard and the front yard and everything. And so it's really weird to see a lot of people come in and just so many restaurants opening. And like the last maybe this year and last year, you're gonna see a lot of restaurants who open and aren't that successful. I've seen restaurants that come in for a spot for less than 6 months and close just because they think that opening a spot like for brunch just a few days a week is going to be successful when it's not.
And it's easy. Like it's because they see all this success around them, right?
Yeah.
Like to anyone that's outside of Portland's like, I mean, even the guy who just gave the speech upstairs was like, it's a mecca for food and all this stuff. So do you feel like, what do you feel like is that differentiating factor that will keep a restaurant open?
I think part of it is the media scene, that you have to be somehow media credentialed, but it's also that a lot of people now, you see people like Kacha and all these other restaurants are bringing home styles like back to the old days kind of food.
Sure.
And you do see some successful, more gimmick kind of food being successful, but that is only for, it's almost an Instagram kind of thing, you know? So you only see that like once or twice, but I think right now there is a heavy influence in the food culture of just the Instagram culture itself, which is, I'm not a huge fan of it. So.
Yeah, of course. And we're going to get into that. But is there anything else as far as like your current views on where the industry's at that you want to share, or that you want to just like, what's top of mind for you, especially being at this food conference where you're...
I think the biggest one right now is probably knowing that all the food carts in downtown Portland right now, there's a huge spot that's going to be pretty much, everyone has to move because they're building a new hotel.
Holy shit.
It's like the one near Portland State, but it's just, there's so many food carts there. Like, have you ever heard of Nom's Kitchen?
No.
Nom's like Kamgan rice, and it's like she came from Andy Ricker.
Yep.
And so she built like this huge success story, and she does have a brick and mortar, but that's her original shop. It's got to move, and the big talk right now in the industry is rent is crazy in Portland.
Right.
And as downtown starts to be more capitalistic, the fear is it might shift into the east side of the bridge, where rent is going to increase.
Yep.
And all these places that want to go brick and mortar won't have the money to go brick and mortar, or they'll try and they'll most likely fail right now.
So it's a Portland-based hotel that just bought up the land and they're just going to kick everybody out?
Yeah, that's
insane.
That's just how it is.
That's so sad. But you're on the media side of things as well now. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about Faint and a little bit about you and kind of give us that journey for you as far as like starting young in restaurants and then to where you're at now. Like what are kind of like those big checkpoints that...
Oh, I don't know. It's a long story. I'm Asian American, obviously.
Yeah.
And so my parents had want me to go to college to be an engineer, doctor. The very stereotypical.
Same.
And I just didn't have a passion for it. I think my dad, groomed me to be this person so quickly that I didn't really have a passion for it. But I always loved food. But my mom, she is Vietnamese, so she always cooked like the pho and all that at home, and I ate that almost every single day, and I got bored of it. And so that's when I really wanted to start learning how to cook for myself. And I remember the first time I tried to cook was, trying to make some fish and chips or something. But I thought I was really fancy, and I made crumbs of like, I think Fruit Loops or something, and I dipped a piece of salmon in it.
Whoa!
And then I tasted, I was like, oh, wow, I'm a horrible cook. But I think that was my first like cooking experience ever. And I remember throwing it in the trash at my mom, asking me what I did, and she got really mad at me and, saying this is expensive. And that's when I knew food, especially in the neighborhood I lived in, was very, it's some people don't have food at all. And that's when I was very food conscious. And when I went to Oregon State, I studied computer science and then pre-med. At that time too, I was also cooking for the Oregon State athletes, and I enjoyed that job. It was my really first culinary job, and I really learned a lot. But at that, it's a very corporate job, and you're making food at huge volumes, and at the end of the day, football games or any sports events, we had to throw away so much. I remember walking through the walk-in, and you see like just slabs of cakes and just steaks that like, and you had to clean up and you just had to toss it away. And seeing that much food waste was it's just not right, because part of our tuition actually went to the athletes.
Yeah.
And so I stopped working there, and I went into horticulture, which was the development of growing vegetables and fruits and everything. And I actually grew my own breed of cucumbers, which is amazing. Like, they had this beautiful crosshair, but they taste like shit. They taste so watery.
Whoa.
But to see the science behind that and, you know, really dive deep into, like, you know, this isn't GMO. Everything is technically GMO. It's created differently. And I took that, and eventually I really wanted to compete and, like, be the best chef I possibly could, because when you're a young chef, that's all you want. Like, you're very narrow-minded.
You're chasing those kind of things.
And so I went to New York, and I trained for David Chang at Momofuku Co. For a long time, and I just, you know, you pretty much eat crap the whole entire time, and, you know, I'm pretty sure you're coming from the French Laundry and, you know, per se and everything, it's you know,
I mean, staff meals didn't suck there, but they also weren't, like, amazingly.
Exactly. Isn't that funny that you think at high-end restaurants you'll have, like, good staff meals, but sometimes you'll have, like, a turkey sandwich or something like that?
I remember French Laundry, Bouchon would always make pizza for everybody on Saturdays, and that was, like, the hardest day, and you're, like, fueling your body with pizza. You know what I mean? It is kind of a weird thing. I want to touch on that horticulture thing, though, because did you do that through a university, or you found some random farmer who was like, hey, I'm totally willing to work with you? How did that work?
At that time, I had a friend who was working as a just an hourly worker, just like helping with the school, and then they had this tour which was just bringing in producers and that, and I was like, you have to take me. And then he took me there, and I met someone named Shinji who was trying to bring in Haska berries from Japan, and he was trying to go pretty much wholesale with it. But he was trying to sell these berries for $6 a pound, which was crazy. But the acidity in these berries were, like, so high and I've never tasted anything like it before. And so I worked with him, and he taught me everything about horticulture. And in return, I would cook at the Saturday market in Corvallis, and I would bring new dishes and introduce these berries to the public, which was awesome.
Sure. So you were finding a way to essentially bring value with the set of skills you already had as kind of like a foot in the door. I think that's, like, a really valuable takeaway from that. Going back to, like, your childhood, what other things were you into when you were, like, 12, 13, 11? Because I feel like a lot of that sometimes dictates what you do later in life. I mean, you mentioned you were kind of an experimental cook, but what, like, were you into video games? Were you into sports? Like,
so that's the crazy thing. My dad was very strict. I've never played Pokemon. I've never touched a Game Boy, Xbox. I've never touched any of this stuff.
Why? Because they thought it would rot your brain, or what?
Exactly. They thought it would rot my brain. I remember we got, like, a Atari one day for, like, Christmas, and my dad, like, it was a gift from a family, and my dad told him to take it back. I still have, like, the cassette, you know, the little Mortal Kombat cassette. You know, that's all I kept. But it was like, when I was a kid, my dad had taught me, like, I programmed my first computer at, you know, when I was 8.
Oh, so you should be selling or you should be creating the consoles, not gaming on them.
Yeah, he wanted me to be, like, the strict, you know, because he came here as an immigrant, so he knew everything, that it was going to be tough. So he programmed that into my, like, life, that you had to work extremely hard. But it was the point where, you know, eventually when I got to college and I was like, I'm going to cook, he was like, you know, what the heck are you talking about? You know, I worked so hard for you to work at a desk job with air conditioner and, you know, just sitting down. But I can't sit at one place for more than 3 hours. I want to be creative, you know, and it just bugs me. Even though if, like, my feet hurt sometimes during service, I was, you know, holding a blade. I was learning cut after cut. And then I think being in the kitchen is an experience that everyone should have at least once, you know, to understand, like, the hard work that goes through it.
Totally. And do you feel like that, you know, I mean, I would hate to say lack of tech, because you had tech in your life. Like, do you feel like that lack of, has any of that childhood stuff manifested itself into where you're at now, or do you think it's just kind of?
I think part of it, the manifestation of being negative when I was younger, because my dad saw the world so negatively, and he wasn't very optimistic. He's like, you can't have this kind of friend, you know, because they're a bad influence. And so when I grew up, I thought the world was negative. I didn't really trust people. You know? Now I trust people at the start, and then, you know, it's lost.
Yeah,
you know,
let it get lost later.
So
what are some? I'm curious to hear, because you made the transition. Then we kind of halted the story there. So you were a chef for a while, and then you got burnt out, right? Why choose to go the media route? Why not go be a painter? Why not go make pottery for restaurants? You know, like, there's so many other options you could have gone down. Where was the spark that hit them? And what is that? The first few sentences of that next chapter, what do they look like?
I was very conscious that whatever I did, I still had to make a living. And at that time, I understood media was growing. The internet was just really starting, and people didn't really understand, you know, how the marketing and the whole Facebook situation with Facebook ads and everything, people were scared of it. And what really hit to me was when people, well, I guess not until a year later, but the fact that we have all this government stuff, and we had the huge thing with Mark Zuckerberg, and he talked about Facebook, and people were scared of it. And if the government is scared of Facebook ads as a marketing thing, it shows how undervalued it is right now, that people aren't really collapsing on it.
Totally.
And so it was just a huge eye opener. And these year gaps were like the biggest things. Like everything great in life will eventually disappear. And so if I know I didn't hone the skills of understanding people and human awareness, and understanding why people love food or why people do certain things, that it was gonna be lost. I'm also I work in the autism spectrum too.
Got it.
So I work with kids who have autism, and kids with autism, they usually have a very pure mind. And to understand these kids and just really build empathy and understand, a cook's life is very hard. You struggle a long time, like all those hours, but a child with a mental health disability, they have it much harder. And so when you compare where you rank in life,
it gives you perspective.
It gives you huge perspective. And being here at Feast, we talk about perspective wise of everyone comes from a different background. So when they talk about their media story, it's really all different and really interesting, actually.
Right. And so you saw it as a land grab, more or less, right? Like this is huge. And were you originally thinking this is going to be a full force media company? This is going to be, I'm going to be a freelance video guy and just help chefs. I'm going to be the next David Gelb and make Chef's Table 2.0 for Netflix. Like, where was your head at in those early days, and how has that transitioned into what Faint is now?
It was originally going to be just me making media that I loved, and I thought that if I loved it enough, I would find the economic, backing for it. And for that, it was like, I was like, I'm not going to make it for the next decade. So I had to, really just focus on myself. And I'm extremely lucky to have, sponsors and lucky breaks where I've been able to expand so quickly and hire people, and, just almost in a way, it makes me unstoppable, because my mindset is very unstoppable.
Sure.
That if I put in the work, anything can technically happen.
Yeah.
And so I guess my next goal would be, it'd be so ambitious to say, but it's like almost the Jonathan Gold of Portland.
Correct.
Food scene.
Correct.
Because we don't really have, we have a lot of outlets here in Portland that, tell about food, but it's in a paragraph form. You know? No one really digs deep and really wants to learn the nitty gritty of, the hardship of it, because that's not a glamorous thing to watch. But that's the truth. And I think with the internet era we live in right now, the truth exposes everything. And, it's just the right thing to do.
Taking it back to, you mentioned you're working with sponsors. Can you tell a little bit about that story? Because I think it's a fascinating insight into like an alternative way to start something up. You know what I mean? So
I think everyone in the beginning of the day, they're always like, I need to find sponsors. I need a crowd fund. I need money to start something. And I tell people all the time, you have to just work for free. And a lot of people want, I think, and artists, they want to get paid for what they do, even if it's like a few bucks. But to really understand, there are so many people who want to be like content creators now, and with the technology of cell phones and that, you can create great pieces on like an iPhone or a Samsung. You don't need like a huge camera crew and that.
Sure.
And even a 5-year-old knows how to take pictures now. And so to really put yourself out there, you have to just work for free.
Yep.
Over and over again. And a lot of people ask, is there shortcuts? And I don't think there is. You just have to grind it, because everyone right now, I think when you're in your early 20s, everyone wants to be an influencer for some reason. Right. Or, be someone important based on, their following numbers or anything like that. So I think hard work will surpass any of that.
Yeah. And so you approach, because Samsung was one of your early folks. How did that come about? You started working for them for free, right?
Yeah.
And that was shooting content on a phone. And then at what point did it click where you said, no, I don't want to be an employee for Samsung. I want Samsung to invest in me. Like, where did that come from?
At that time, there was huge news about cryptocurrency and everything, and with technology and with AI development and everything. And I was very public of how I view technology, that this was a stopping force, and no one was going to stop this. Like, even if you fear technology, it's never, people want to.
It's too far.
It's human nature almost that they want to create something that would almost dominate us one day, and I have that fear that eventually we're all gonna die by computers, but hopefully I don't see the day to it. But that being said, I knew that I made the statement so public, and I knew that if people saw me that I was crazy or something, that was fine. But if there was one or two people who actually believed in me, who had the money to support this idea, then that was it. That's all I needed, was the foot in the door, or someone to be like, let's give him a chance. And I think for any entrepreneur, anyone who is a content creator who is trying to find that sponsorship, you have to have you ever followed Gary Vaynerchuk?
Yeah, of course.
The left right hook kind of thing mentality.
Totally.
That was
bring value.
Yeah, that was me the whole entire time. And so when I finally asked, and I was like crossing my fingers, they're like, oh yeah, sure. And it caught me by attention. And so almost everything now, even with the show I do for Portland, I do for free. Because I know in the long term that's going to develop some kind of legacy for me here. Hopefully like a legacy that Jonathan Gold does. And I don't want to say his name and compare, but it's like, that is the hope and dream. Yeah,
I mean, if you keep that as a North Star and you're being inspired by him in the positive light, as far as like, I don't think you need to look at it as a negative, at least from my perspective, because you're not doing it for, I want to be the critic for the LA Times kind of thing. You're not doing it for the job title. You know what I mean? You're doing it for the sake of telling the story. So you get that initial investment from Samsung. What made you think of what you did with the money? Like because can you tell a little bit about that? Because I feel like 9 out of 10 people would have done something else. Having that knowledge, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like being young and being from a family that didn't have much. I knew that like when my mom used to give me $50 every month, I thought that was $1 million. And now I got this huge investment, and then I was like, this is so much money. I don't know what to do with it. And my family always sacrificed so much for me, and so I knew I had to just hold on to it and wait, And at that time, I was only 20, 21 years old, so I didn't really need anything.
Right.
And I think that's the big thing with our age or our generation is, if you have a lot of money, people want to buy cars, they want to buy nice things to show off. And for me, I lived in a life where my dad was the only working person, and he put food on the table, and he wore the same shirt all his life. And I grew up wearing these purple like sweatpants in middle school, and I would get made fun of, but that's like I couldn't do anything because that's the financial status of my family.
Sure.
And so I just took that money, I held on to it, and I just watched for trends, because I knew with saying, I talked about AI and everything, so I knew it was coming. So eventually when Uber came around, and people thought it was really weird that people got in cars and that, and now you see it's all over the place, I knew that was the best thing to go. And like with anything, you have to go all in.
And so you made an investment in Uber, which gave you great returns. Was that weird? You have a timer going off. Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. Do you want to restart it? You're fine to restart it if you want.
Well, I might just grab the clips from your.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. So you take the investment money from Samsung, put it in Uber. Was that something where like you were using some of the money to still create content during that time, or were you just kind of like, I'm not going to tell Samsung this is what I'm doing with the money, it's going to pay off eventually? Because to me, like being someone who also like their parents were like not crazy stingy with money, but my parents taught me the value of money, right? So to hear that someone would give you money and then you would do something else with it other than what is technically intended with it was kind of like off limits, right? What's going through your head, and what else are you doing during that process when you're like...
They had believed in my idea that this was going to be big and I was going to build something like as an empire almost. So they had to really just trust me,
Yep.
And, Samsung being that, they have so much money already. So
so you're fine.
So
they're going to survive.
I was okay with it. But it was the other half I hired more people, because if I wanted to do what I wanted at scale, I just needed more people.
Yep.
And again, being at a young age, I knew I didn't need the money. And I think that, like you said, we talk about perspective so much, and when you really understand the ability that if you give someone an opportunity to work for you, they're going to put all their, 100% in, and then someone that they care about might want to work for you too. And that just spreads like wildfire.
What were some of those initial first hires you made? Like, was it an accounting person? Was it an additional videographer? Was it an editor for your videos? Like, what were some of those first hires you made?
It was pretty much a CFO.
Okay.
Because I didn't go to school for business or anything. You know, I was Googling terms up as I went. So I needed someone to pick up that weakness. And with like content creating, I was trying to find someone who is very passionate, you know. From all the employees we have, I never looked for anyone with like a degree. It wasn't a requirement. I really looked for the passion. And even our interns now, our interns actually work for free, which for some, like, they can't handle it because, you know, they need to get paid. And but it really narrows out like the right kind of people. I think I surround myself with people who are very positive and optimistic, because I view life as there's no point in looking at the negativity in life. And so I wanted people to just keep pushing even through the hard times where it seems like, you know, impossible. And we just live in a world right now that's anything is possible.
I think it's important that you also have the same outlook about yourself and about the business as far as like working for free, because a lot of people, it's very easy for people to scoff at people that ask people to work for free for them, because a lot of times, like, whether it's a chef or a big media company, like, they're making hundreds of millions of dollars or however many dollars, and it's like, what do you mean you want me to work for free for you, right? But I think it's important that you come with that empathy to your interns of like, I also work for free. I want to talk a little bit about some of your influences. You talked about Jonathan Gold. You've talked about Gary Vaynerchuk already. What are some either like people that you've looked to during this transition, as well as like what are some, if there have been any resources or podcasts or blogs that you've used during this journey? Because I mean, I'm the same way, right? Like, I didn't go to school for media. All my stuff is self-taught. Even on the food-wise stuff, I went to culinary school, but it wasn't like, I learned more from mentors and working at places. Who are some people that you look up to, and what are some of those resources?
It's hard because for me to look up to someone, it had to be because they're right now in the space when it comes to Asian Americans. There's no one doing what I'm doing. Who's someone who owns an actual agency.
Sure.
So there wasn't anyone to look up to. At that, like, I think the only person I can say was pretty much like Gary Vaynerchuk when he talks about hustle, you know, and grind. Casey Neistat, you know, he was creating video content like constantly. For someone to actually do that
and for Samsung, just like you,
it's crazy, you know, for creating content all the time. But I think, I don't think I have much of an inspiration. It was more like, if I want to be happy, I have to do this no matter what, and that was the drive that, you know, got me up every single day.
Do your parents support you now that they see it's successful and taken off, or are they still in the back of their head?
Like a couple years ago, my dad thought I was crazy. I'm pretty sure when I graduated college, my dad thought I was gonna be homeless. Because he works for the government, and he worked for the city of Portland for a very long time. So he knows, you know. And I think that's why I talk about negativity, because he works for the police, and he always hears these negative stories and depiction of people, and he always, you know, he views life on the negative side. And for me to be so positive and optimistic, it seemed like, you know, not realistic to him. And I think it's pretty recent, maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, my dad, you know, my mom actually kissed me on both cheeks and hugged me and cried because she was happy that I was successful. Because she thought, when I was talking about this media whole thing, she's like, what is it? It doesn't make sense, because they didn't grow up in that era. And to see, you know, the fruition and, you know, to turn that into actual money,
dollars,
that's when they were happy. And, you know, I'm slowly trying to teach my mom that happiness isn't money. Like, money does give you the freedom, obviously.
Correct.
But, you know, happiness comes in a lot of different forms.
Yep. That's such a powerful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for having me. Still,
yeah,
man.
of course.
This is amazing.
I was gonna ask about. Well, I could go two routes with this. I was gonna ask about your day to day now and what you like to spend your time with, and how you juggle between New York, Portland, media. And tell us a little bit about what Faint does as a company, because it's not food related at its core.
And I think that's a huge perspective, because I ran a food Instagram in the beginning, and then when I became an entrepreneur, people thought I was doing food stuff, but it's nothing at all. It's more like a hobby. And my friend Chad from he owns 50 Licks Ice Cream here in Portland. He told me that you never want to make your hobby your career, because the fun of it.
Sure, gets sucked out.
It's gone.
Yeah.
And so at the core, Faint Media is a business. It's a digital media agency that works, a platform of, video, writing, and
Audio.
voice.
Yeah.
And so we create content for these huge companies. We make their content, we do their SEO, we do almost pretty much from A to Z.
Mm-hmm.
And I do scale in some small businesses, but the thing that I don't think people know is when I work with small restaurants or that kind of stuff on social media, you have people who are influencers who are asking money for it. I do it for absolutely free.
Right.
Because again, value, right?
Yep. Bring
value
the value
and legacy.
now. Yeah.
And so that's pretty much what I do. And on the free time, I don't have free time.
Mm-hmm.
Feast Portland is like my one vacation I'll probably take till I'm like 30. Because I love hustle and grind so much.
And I mean, you're even working right now, technically. That's how I see it,
And it's also like the partnership, right? And collaboration is going to it's huge in the next few years when it comes to technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so for right now, my day-to-day is I wake up pretty early. I exercise because I need to. And I'll do my meetings, my emails, get that all done throughout the day. And then I work as a behavior therapist for like kids with autism. And that brings the whole it's almost therapy for me.
Sure.
Because like I said, I didn't grow up with the Xbox or anything. So for me to be a kid again, to hang out with these kids and just, pretend play and all them and to see them happy and give them hugs. Like I've never played Mario Kart in my life until I worked with the kids there. And now every time I destroy a kid, I feel so happy. So it's that kind of experience and perspective though.
Sure.
That was the main reason I wanted to work there, is to understand that as hard as life is, some of us are extremely lucky. Like for us to be in this huge hotel right now,
Yep.
to have this weekend is lucky. A lot of people, dream to do something like this, and to have that, it's almost like I wrote a LinkedIn article talking about Batman, how Batman takes a burden to, help the world, but it's like he wears this mask, and I think as an entrepreneur or even as a content creator, that mask for you is always on.
Sure.
You can't really take it off.
Sure.
Even if it is off sometimes. Like I think one of the hardest issue for me was when I transitioned here. A lot of my friends thought I changed. If you went to college at that time, people think when you graduate that's where you are in life. You work that 9-to-5 job for the rest of your life. You have kids, you have a house, and you live happily. And for me, that wasn't enough. You know what I mean? And I think people they stop growing. And for me, people are like, "Oh, you're changing so much," but that's how life is.
Yeah.
I think you change in life until the day you die.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I changed so rapidly. I was first like this. People knew me as this cook, the chef, and then now he's an entrepreneur. What the hell is he doing? And it was so many people that questioned what I was doing. And as long as I believed I had genuine intentions, I just sort of ignored them.
Yep.
Which is hard now because I've lost some dear friends because I've gone on this journey. But it's in hope that for them to understand that I want to build something that no one else has. And
totally.
For you to do that, you have to put in the work.
Yeah, sacrifices have to happen. So I've experienced burnout before. Mm-hmm. I know how it feels to work these long hours in restaurants for little pay and not a lot of recognition, and you're getting berated, and then at a certain point, it breaks, right? For me, I've always been drawn back to it after I take whatever hiatus I need to take. Did you ever have that moment where you're like, I really miss cooking, I really kind of want to go back, or has it been kind of like you made the decision that I don't want this to develop into a cycle, so I'm going to break the cycle by doing something else?
I still live in that cycle because, when I got my first shun knife, that was my first chef's knife. I thought that was like the glorious thing in the world, when you're a cook or a chef. And for me to, look at the shelves now and see that it's just collecting dirt, it's almost a pain because I had studied food so much, everything from understanding temperature to sous vide, and I bought all these machines. I spent so much money because this is what I thought I was going to be my whole entire life, was just this chef. And to see that it's my chef jacket is still hung up, it's really weird to be like, why am I here now?
Yep.
And we're at Feast, and to see that people are cooking again and how fun they're having, even though probably in their head they're like, I need to do this quick. Chef needs this right away, and the timing and everything. That's like something I miss. It's sort of weird, right? You miss the stress. You miss being yelled at for some reason.
Totally. And there's something about that with people in the industry. I feel like they the abuse is part of it in a way, where it's like, whether it be attention or feeling like you matter in some element, where it's like, I mean, they say that with kids, right? Like the reason that kids are so annoying sometimes is because they just want to be recognized. I think there's something there, but I was just curious because I thought at this last time when I got burnt out, which was before I moved to Europe, I haven't been burnt out in many years, but I thought that was going to be the last time, and I was going to be like, I'm done with restaurants. It's not going to happen anymore. And then I got drawn back in, and now I don't know. I feel like, what is it that you would say to someone that's burnt out? Like if someone's listening that just feels like it's over, or that it's like it's been too much for them in whatever industry they're in, or whatever job they're in. Has there been any tools or kind of like mindset changes or things that you've used to combat burnout?
I think the question is, does it make you happy enough? I think when you're a cook and you're not making enough money, but you love the food and you love being in that scene, there's a balance in life, you know. If you want to be extremely happy and make small wages, go ahead, you know. And I think it's also the comparison of how other people view you, which is huge. Because, you know, chefs back then, if you were a cook, people were like, wow, you're a loser. Now everyone wants to be a cook. Everyone wants to go to culinary school and somehow be a celebrity chef, which isn't really, you know, realistic anymore. But it's that perspective I think people have of you. And I think you have to understand that you're your own person, and that no one knows you better than yourself. So you shouldn't value anyone's opinion over who you are. Sure. You know, still be conscious and listen to people and, you know, nod your head and, you know, agree in that, but don't let anyone's opinion affect you, because that means you're giving them the ability and the leverage to, you know, change who you are. Right. And that should never happen.
Yeah. Talk to me about the food project you're working on now in Portland, The People.
So I have a series in Portland right now. It's called The People. We're on our 3rd season, and it's the focus of just the stories behind the chefs, you know. There's obviously some B-roll to food to keep people engaged, but most of it's a very dark show. Yeah, which I think is an interesting direction you took it. I think because with food media right now, like especially, you know, I'm not going to say names because of the sponsors of this event, but, you know, you see food that's like, even the lighting and the color contrast is very bright. You know, it wants you to be happy, and, you know, you have BuzzFeed who does, like, you know, the Worth It and all this and the venture, and people are like, oh, I want to do this one day too. And so, and realistically, if you talk to a chef, they're like, you know, the food doesn't just arrive at the table. We have producers, and I think that's the one thing that I think you could probably agree with fine dining. Some people, from the outside perspective, they don't know why it's so expensive. Sure. Just because the producer has to be paid, and then the time and everything, and people don't understand that they just call it, you know, pretentious food. Correct. And which is really hard, because in a way I agree with it, but it's priced for that for a reason. And so what The People does, or the series does, is I pretty much go with the chef, and, you know, I talk about their life, and, you know, talk about their hardship, and most importantly, if there was any like tragic event, like when Bourdain died, I interviewed chef and we talked about mental health, you know. And with even when Jonathan Gold passed away, we talked about if, you know, how does social media affect everything. And so it's being able to direct and produce this by myself and personally, it allows me to control like the factors of what I want to do, like storytelling wise. Yep. And right now the focus is just keep telling the stories, because another thing about the media is they're always focused on like the big names, and I'm telling stories about the, you know, the little food cars that, you know, are very homey, that don't get attention, and, you know, but they have fantastic food. Absolutely. And so to really bring that knowledge, especially in Portland's food scene is crazy. It's insane. Blowing up. Yeah. And, you know, and this is no offense to any publication, but I always hear about the same 3 restaurants over and over Correct. Again. It's either, you know, you're talking about a picture, or you're just, you know, it's not enough. Yep. And one of the projects that we're working on, my friend, his name's Kyle from Dame Restaurant, he wants to open up a publishing company for just industry-made individuals. And I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that yet, because he's the big guy on that, but it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I think that this industry should be run more by people who are chefs and who do come from culinary backgrounds. And I think it's great that you're making it a passion project, like you said, so it doesn't turn into this thing where you're trying to
sell it to someone or change it in a way that would either make it more mainstream or more watered down or whatever. It's still true to you, and it's the stories that you're excited about telling, which I also think is like underrated.
I actually think in the industry right now, I think I'm a really dark horse.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when I came into Feast Portland, this is my first year doing the media, I sat there and it was really awkward because everyone knew each other, you know, everyone knows each other in the food scene, and then I'm just this person here. Like when we sat on that bus, I was like, what's going on this bus, you know? But I really do think I'm a dark horse in this industry.
Totally. And I think it's so funny, the dichotomy, because we're similar in that way, where you were cooking here last year, right? Like you were cooking here with a restaurant, and now this year you're here on media.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, it was like 2 or 3 years ago, my chef from Norway came here to cook, and I was supposed to come with him, but I didn't, and now I'm here for media. Like it's weird.
The crazy thing about Feast is like yesterday when we did the 80s and 90s, I was shaking hands with chefs that fired me.
No way.
Yeah, so like I think when I officially trained here, a lot of chefs fired me just because like they're like, oh, you're too slow, or you can't make a perfect quinella or something like that. So it's really weird to stand across them and just shake their hand, and that you still have that respect for them. They have that respect for you.
Correct. Well, because now you're playing to your strengths, right?
Yeah.
Like now you're I mean, you made the realization that, you know, the food thing burns me out. That what you're doing now, you're working more, I would argue, right? Yeah. And you're not being burnt out, which I think is a really important thing, where a lot of people associate long work hours with burnout, and it's like this cause and effect thing, but it's not always the case, right? Like the cause is something deeper than that. It's not the hours. Definitely. Because you're working more hours now.
Yeah, shout out to the chefs though that fired me. It's great seeing you guys again.
Love it. Let's see. You wanted to talk about Entitlement.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because it is a commodity now. Everybody owns one of these, right? And it's easier than ever to get access sometimes, because all you got to do is send that DM and say, I'll create this, I'll shoot photos for you. So what are your thoughts on that?
Entitlement is just a huge thing right now when it comes to like the following number.
Got it.
Just because I think a lot of people think they bring value because they have that number, and when you and this is no offense to anyone I've met today or anything, but it's like I've followed a lot of people on Instagram who I thought were really awesome people, you know, when it came to food, and then when you meet them in real life and you see how they're taking pictures and everything, like our opening night for Feast, I saw a girl ask for 10 scoops of ice cream on her thing, and which is ridiculous. You're not going to eat that. And I know the owner, and I looked at the owner, and we made eye contact. We're like, this is crazy. And then I had his GM right next to me. He's like, these people on Instagram, they just do it for the gram, right?
Sure.
And just after that, she just, the garbage was just down there, and she just tossed it away.
Jesus.
Kind of thing. So I think it's that kind of influence. People don't understand that they have a lot of ability. When I talk to a lot of chefs, the biggest fear is like with Yelp and everything, someone made that platform for them to talk about it, and now it's so dependent, and it affects the chefs so much, they can't really fight against it because they have to worry about their own business.
Right.
And so they have entitlement, and people come in restaurants and believe that they know everything, that they're the Jonathan Gold of, you know, the food scene, can really affect someone's business and can sometimes really shut them down. And when it comes back to perspective, right, I don't think people have enough perspective. They are entitled to amazing food when sometimes we might have a bad service, you know. And I think that it's just a big issue right now, and I think that's only going to grow, especially in the food scene.
So what do you have to say to those people who are, you know, they see, I'm trying to like stop the buck somewhere, right? So like you have someone who sees all these Instagram influencers or food bloggers that are, you know, going to restaurants, getting food for free, shooting these lavish dishes that are kind of way over the top. What should they be thinking about instead?
I think they should, you know, I can't tell people to live their life anyway.
Correct.
It's obviously just be more self-aware of, you know, the impact you have. It's so powerful right now. Right. You know, if you're an influencer, and that, you know, your ability to really help people is there. Like anyone right now can be an influencer and really make a change in the world. And the state of our country and the state of the world, you know, people are starving, you know, that's why we're here at Feast and everything, that if you can help one person through anything in life and make their day better, that's winning. That's such a strong message.
So it should be more about helping and sharing rather than showing off.
Yes.
I guess is the thing, right?
Exactly.
Or like getting recognition for being somewhere or getting something. I mean, I think back to that 10-scoop ice cream cone, right? Like, yeah, you're gonna get some attention, right? Like the attention's gonna be there, but for what? I guess for what is the question.
I would say love the creation more than you love what you get out of it.
Got it.
Because I think if you're chasing the end goal all the time, you're going to be addicted to it, and you're just going to do it because you want the end product.
Yeah, if that end product is numbers.
Yes.
Only numbers,
yes.
Right? I get it. I'm going to go rapid fire questions on you.
Okay, let's go.
It's a Saturday morning on your first day off after your work week, and you're standing in front of your kitchen. How do you make your eggs?
Over easy.
Would it change if you made that for your parents? Do you like making eggs in a certain way?
My parents, when they eat eggs, they eat that shit dry. Okay, they leave it there and they make sure it changed to a different color and they just put soy sauce on it. But it's
green eggs.
My perfect breakfast would be sunny side eggs with some chorizo and some bread.
Dope.
That's all.
Dope. Name an ingredient you're obsessed with right now.
Right now it's tofu.
Tofu?
I'm just so fascinated at how people can make tofu taste differently and
yeah.
just the texture in it. I'm crazy obsessed with it.
Like
right
silken tofu, firm
tofu, and also just like tofu with like even stuffed tofu.
Yeah.
Just like anything tofu right now.
I've never made tofu before. It's on my list. Name a book that's been particularly impactful for you that you're most likely to recommend. It can be food related, it can be a cookbook, or it can be a business book.
I don't read books anymore.
Really?
I think I was reading like self-help books, and like there's one book by I forgot what it is. It's How to Be a Badass or something. And I was reading. I was like, I am this.
Yeah,
book.
yeah. I got this.
I gave the book away.
Yeah. That's awesome. Is there a technique that you're still intimidated by in the kitchen?
In the kitchen? Oh, probably making no. I think it's Cornella's still.
Really?
Yeah, and I've always had this issue with it, maybe because like I try to train it myself and I'm not making the ice cream base, I don't make it firm enough or something like that, or even when I try on butter or something like that, like I can't make Cornella's for some reason.
We just met, so you probably haven't seen any of my videos yet, but I have a video all about you could buy a big tub of Crisco, like vegetable shortening, and if it's at the right temperature, you can practice over and over and over again because it doesn't melt, but it's the consistency of tempered butter or ice cream. So you got to watch that video and you got to practice it up. You somehow get a call right after this interview that you've just won an all expenses paid trip to eat at your dream restaurant. And when you get there, a person you've always wanted to talk with is waiting to have dinner with you. Where is that restaurant and who is that person?
Probably, I want to say Noma, but then I feel like that's the typical answer. But I think he's just doing crazy stuff.
Totally.
There.
Yeah, Noma 2.0 is next level. And who would you have dinner with?
With anyone?
It can be living or dead.
Will Smith.
Really? I mean, he's
I
killing the vlog game right now.
Yeah, dude. Well,
can't argue with that.
That's the thing. Like, let's jump back real quick about the technology. You're seeing people like Kevin Hart, even Steph Curry, and even Dwayne Wade. Like they're starting YouTube channels there,
as they should.
Yeah, because they're cutting out the middleman.
Yeah,
and they're just doing their own content.
Do you know Gary's rant on that, where he's like, 7 or 8 NBA players could just start their own league, and it would do well.
Yeah, like Shaq
it's very
and Kobe
real. Yeah, like if they all just came together and they're like, F the NBA, we're gonna create our own league, and we're just gonna have all our boys come out and we're gonna play, and we're gonna create a media company around it to broadcast the games, and it's real. Like the like you said, the land grab is real.
Yes.
Like the way. I don't know where I'm trying to get to with this question, but just picking your brain on the thoughts. Have you seen anything with chefs in that way? Because you and I are on the very same level where I don't feel so much of my content creation started with being frustrated with the fact that, you're a chef at this hotel, right? You get a write-up from a Portland publication or some blogger comes in and does their thing in your restaurant. You don't have any control over that content. I think that the control should go back to the chef, and the chef should be producing media of their own in the same way that Will Smith and Dwayne Wade are producing their own media, so they don't have to deal with paparazzi. I feel like that's the comparison, is like celebrities deal with paparazzi, chefs deal with
that's a good
food
comparison.
bloggers. You know what I mean? So if you as the chef are producing the media, you're in control of that story. You know what I mean? Have you seen anyone yet? We were talking a little bit about Major Domo, with David Chang yesterday. Have you seen anyone yet that you've been like, they're doing it right?
In the Portland food scene, there's no chef central like storyteller.
Yeah.
But there are a few like I guess social media companies that they work with that are doing it well.
Sure.
But even with that, I think they need to do more of it. You know,
because people will consume it, right?
Yes.
There's so much stuff that goes undocumented in a kitchen that people will binge watch on the regular.
I feel weird that even if you took your phone and you went to a restaurant and you just left it there and put a live stream, that people would actually watch it to see, you know.
Grace used to do that. Grace
Really?
used to live stream their services, but it was so bad. It was so bad because the angles were always super awkward, and they would never explain the dishes that they were presenting. It was just like, set it down on the counter. You could definitely tell it was like Bain Marie put a phone up next to it and just leave it. You know what I mean? And there was nobody ever narrating it or like, I mean, you've done live streams before, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to kind of control the live stream at a certain point. Olmsted in Brooklyn also used to do that with their services. They had like an overhead rig where they would live stream their pass during the service, so you could see all the plates coming in and going. But it was potato quality footage, and again, no one was explaining what's happening. I feel like that's very important during a restaurant live stream to be like, it's Friday night. Our PDR just sat down. Like we got all this stuff coming in. This is our ticket row. Like you got to kind of give some narration. I feel like to have a live stream that keeps people coming back over and over again.
Then. Do you think that these new Netflix series are helping them with like Ugly Delicious and all these Chef's Table?
Yeah. I think that it's definitely shining a light on places that wouldn't normally get covered by things like New York Times or these larger food publications, because they're more... It's not that their story is any less impactful. I just feel like it's not a watered-down mainstream story of like coming up from nothing or blah, 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 blah. Like some of the stories that get told in Ugly Delicious are amazing. But I just think it's funny that the Chef's Table story arc is always the same, where it's like they have a very specific storyboard that they do with almost every single episode and every single chef. I feel like there's an opportunity for smaller independent creators to partner with chefs and be like, listen, I know you have this story and I want to tell it for you, but I don't necessarily think that it has to come from, it doesn't have to be custom tailored for Netflix.
Yeah.
I think that it can be something, because ultimately like the content that I produce for friends of mine that have food related businesses is to help their business. You know what I mean? And I feel like your mindset is very similar in that. It's like, I can create this beautiful movie for you, but the value that I can bring to you is more sales or like more consistent business or like more return customers or customers that come in and they say, hey, I saw the video about you and I'm really excited to come eat here now. Whereas before, I mean, what does a restaurant have to do? Put their website online, put a tweet out, you know, like have an Instagram page. I just think that there is value in that Netflix stuff because, I mean, it's the Chef's Table effect, right? Like you go to a restaurant and, I mean, half the people, when I went to go eat at Osteria Francescana, right? I feel like years ago before his Chef's Table episode, it would have been like, oh, it's this guy who has a really amazing restaurant in Italy. Now it's like, oh, is that the guy from Chef's Table? I think that's an interesting conversation where it's like, if your restaurant gets on Chef's Table, because so many of these people on Netflix that are watching Chef's Table don't read Eater. They don't get food and wine delivered to their door. So you're broadening your audience, right? It's these guys who just like these people who just like sitting on their couch and watching food shows. And I think you're broadening your audience if you get a Chef's Table episode, and I think that's underrated. I don't know.
Right. That's definitely true. That's a good point you made there.
Yeah.
Where do you think our industry will be in the next few years then? You know, like, just because, you know, prices of rent is going to be high.
Totally.
You know,
totally.
And we talked about this, like, yesterday on the bus, like, the whole fine dining aspect of it. Where do you think it's going to be in a few years?
I think fine dining needs to see how it can how it can bring in alternate sources of revenue. So we were talking with this couple upstairs at breakfast about these. It's a couple, and they're partners in this business that does delivery, right? And then there's all these other places that I've covered on the show before that do delivery-based food out of the same space, where they have 40 seats, but they serve 800 meals a day because they're able to do all these takeout meals and Uber Eats and whatever. I think chefs need to be very thoughtful about how they're expanding these bottlenecks, right? So in a restaurant, you have 45 seats, right? Yeah. That is technically your bottleneck, right? Because you can max out at revenue. And the story I always like to tell is, like, if you sell headphones and tomorrow Wall Street Journal writes about your headphones and you get 1,000 orders for headphones in, you can call up your factory and be like, hey, I need 1,000 more headphones. Hang up the phone. By next week, it's going to be delivered. And your customers are happy, right? You got an influx of interest and orders. You can satisfy those orders and profit from it. If I have a 45-seat restaurant and Chef's Table episode comes out about my restaurant, and all of a sudden I'm like El Bulli and 500,000 people call to make a reservation, how many times do I have to say no? No. I can't fit you into my restaurant, right? So that's where the bottleneck happens. Yeah. So chefs, I think, have to be very thoughtful about how do they expand that bottleneck, whether it's takeout food, whether it's a cookbook. I mean, that's the classic way to, like, spread the ideas, whether it's something media related, whether it's, going to a festival and serving people your food. So between that, thinking about how does that bottleneck affect the business? Because, I mean, if you don't want to serve 500,000 people a year, you don't have to. I mean, you can be like Magnus Nielsen at Fäviken and serve however, like, a couple hundred people is probably how many people he serves in a year. But I also have to think, I also think that chefs and restaurateurs should think about how they can make money off of things that are not food. Yes. Because I feel like that's something that people get super caught up with, is like, I am a chef, I cook food, this is my thing. And I think that the people that we're going to start to see that are successful in the next 3 to 5 years are the ones that realize that, yes, I can do the food. I can do the food thing. It can be a restaurant. It can be a takeout business. It can be whatever. It can be a food truck. But I can also make money outside of that. And I look to someone like David Cheng as someone who is doing that right now. And we're going to look back and see, like, oh, he saw it. Like, he saw that media was going to be important. He saw that, I mean, rest in peace to Lucky Peach, but it was like, that set him up for this next chapter for himself. And I think that being someone that sees that it's very rare right now, because for people like us, there's no path, right? Like, there's no one you can go work under to be like, teach me how to do food and media at the same time. We're kind of like just out here
winging it.
Winging it, like learning as we go. And with media, it's the same thing, right? Like, you can't. It is laughable to think about going to a university to learn a social media course. Like, who's going to teach that? Number one. Number two, in 18 months, whatever you learn is going to be obsolete. So why you can't learn in a formal setting. You can't be an accredited social media expert, because who's going to give you that accreditation?
Exactly.
Right? So you have to, like, build it on your own and then use that as the leverage to be like, look what I built. What would be a win with you for Faint?
For Faint? I've been asked this a lot, and then I think it's right now it is successful as it is.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't expect to be here until I was 30, and I'm 24 now. So I think the next journey is to keep going, but also to venture out on, like, other avenues. But most importantly, like, still keep to the morals of it, which is, doing the right thing and being genuine and not being apologetic for the stories I'm going to tell.
Sure.
And I think it's, for me, next part would be for me to personally influence people in the education scene. I think education right now is going to be very troubling. Like, I think if you went to school for business, right now you come out, it's a whole entire new
doesn't
world.
Look good for you. Yeah.
It's everything, like the terms you learn and the statistics, that's all cool in that. But when you come out here and you're faced with, I think that's the one thing that bothers me a lot, is a lot of universities, they have entrepreneurship programs where you have mock,
Sure.
you do mock kind of stuff.
Sure.
And when you realize and you come out of here, you need you need money to start your business, and you learn that you're working 16, 18 hours a day, trying to just make enough so you can just eat.
Yep.
It's hard because I went to a restaurant and we had a meeting, and he talked about that for him to open a restaurant, he starved a lot, which is crazy, right?
Yeah,
As a chef,
yeah.
to open your own restaurant, you have to actually starve a lot to even make food.
Yep.
Which is, I think, the hard realization of where we are right now is everyone wants to be something, and they talk it up. You see it on their Instagram profile that they're entrepreneurs or whatever, and a lot of them won't back it up.
As someone who has spent time in some high-end kitchens, and there are a lot of like line cooks, sous chefs, culinary school students listening to this show, what do you think that chefs can be doing better to help the next generation, based on like stories you've heard from chefs or your own personal thoughts?
I think it depends on the chef, the chef in general. I would love to see more chefs just, on their off time or something, just going out with their team or something. I think it's less and less that, like, I think it happens a lot more now, but we talked about it before that the whole egotistic chef is disappearing, and people are becoming more, family honed and everything like that. But I think there's a balance, right? You need to have that relationship where they respect you and they can do their job, but also know that if they have a sick day, that give them a sick day.
Yeah, it's a real sick day. Yeah.
So just I think perspective.
Yeah.
And feel more empathetic about things, and just collaboration. I think collaboration is number one right now, and this is what Feast is all about. Yeah. Is just collaborating with other chefs, and because I don't think anyone can do it by themselves anymore. David Chang was very lucky. Yeah. To like get Peter and some of the other people that he's worked with that have just been. I think that's another thing that we're going to see quite a bit is not the dissolving, but it's going to be very rare to see the standalone chef anymore. I feel like the potential for you to be a either solo chef as part of a larger collective, whether it's a media empire or going into packaged food or whatever, like going onto the big boat, like building a larger ship as opposed to like going out on your own little dinghy is going to be like huge, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years. We're not going to see the Alain Ducasse or the Paul Bocuse or the like the standalone chef that has his 3 Michelin-starred restaurant anymore. I feel like the potential to reach 10x number of people and share your ideas with so many more people is going to be way too attractive and filled with less gatekeepers. And if you really want to have a big food empire, surrounding yourself with that core team of 2 to 10 people that are going to help you, I agree. I think is going to be, I think it's got to go from, it's a David Chang restaurant, it's a Grant Atkins restaurant, to just the name of the restaurant. Correct. The Major Domo restaurant. Yeah, the Momofuku. Yeah, I agree. Or the Noma. Which Noma has done great with, hugely successful, because it's not even like, it's Noma 108. I mean, Bar, their restaurant, they're investors in Bar. It totally makes sense. Do you have a style with your video? Because it's something that I kind of struggle with sometimes, because I don't think I have one, but maybe I do. I don't know. It's really interesting. I think my style is 24p. I shoot very low and almost like theater-like, and I shoot almost all the time handheld, just because I want it to be the realistic feel, like especially where the series is going specifically. I shoot at 24p, no slow-mo or anything, and just straight up there, and the raw and dark feeling about it. Even how I color grade it, it's almost very dark and all that. And it was funny because every time we get into these conversations, and even off our on camera, they're like, dude, your show is really like, it's sort of depressing. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, dude, it's crazy depressing, but I'm really happy about it, because that's the story. That's the story. That's real. Yeah, the truth. Yeah, like, and they can't fake it, because that's their life. So. Yeah. I love that. How about you? Do you have a certain like? I think it depends on. I watched a couple of vlogs last night. I was like, it's like, you're a pretty good vlogger. Yeah, you thanks, got that enthusiastic. Thanks, yeah, I'm trying to. With most of my like talking head style stuff, it's always 24p, very real and trying to be authentic.
But when I'm doing stuff for clients, which a lot of stuff like that isn't posted on YouTube, I kind of like try to ask them what they want, because sometimes a client will be like, I want it really like quick and snappy, to like fast-paced music, and then sometimes people will be like, I kind of want like slow, cinematic aesthetic, lots of slow motion, transitions, blah 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 blah. Which has been great for me, because then I can try to learn all these different techniques of like watching these tutorials on like how do you slow down footage, or how do you like adjust your frame rate to make sure that it all matches up, and all of that, because then it makes it something where it's like, you know, I can shoot a talking head video, but now because of that client work that I did where I shot something in slow motion, I can shoot some B-roll about this knife that I'm talking about and insert that into the talking head video. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's constantly learning, and that's something that like, for me with food, I certainly feel like in like the modern American cooking realm, I certainly feel like I plateaued at a certain point, right? Like I learned how to sous vide, I learned how to cook fish, I learned how to butcher meat, I learned how to like cook vegetables and make purees and infused oils and all this stuff that like is all the techniques that are used in all the modern American kitchens of the day. And I plateaued there. And so video for me was something where it's like I started at zero, and it was very, very exciting, because I thrived in that growing up, like talking about when you're a kid. That was like my favorite thing, was like starting from zero at something and tinkering with it and learning about how I learned best, and reading the books and figuring out when you're learning guitar, like all that stuff was very, very exciting for me.
It's a journey, right? The journey to any place is going to be the best.
And it's something that I was very fearful of, because I cooked for almost 10 years in all these restaurants, and it was weird to go from this thing that I knew so well, and I almost forgot what it feels like to be a beginner. But it's so, I realized that's where I'm truly happy, is like you said, progress and change. Like embracing change has been very, 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 very valuable for me. Where it's like, that's where I'm comfortable, is change and adapting and figuring out how we're gonna figure this out.
I think that's the fun of life, though.
Yeah.
I think it's like if you just be stagnant all your life, then life is very full when you understand that it's out there, and you just have to actually put in the work. And
the struggle provides fulfillment, I think. Where it's like if you're just comfortable, like if someone gave you $1 million and told you to go sit on a beach and drink Mai Tais, you would be miserable, because you're not learning anything, you're not doing anything, you're not providing a value to the world. But so many people like see that as like the win.
That's the end goal.
That's the end goal, and it's like, that's not the win. The win is to like continue to create and help people and share your ideas, and I to me that's success.
And,
I don't know.
And there's nothing wrong for people who actually want to sit on the
zero
beach
ideas.
Mai Tais,
Zero.
Everyone has different values, so
it's just, I feel like once you struggle, then you come out on the other side, and then you feel fulfilled. You're solving problems. You're like making stuff happen. I feel like that's, I don't know.
In a way, do you feel like you're addicted to it? That after you come out and you solve something, especially at 26 now, that there's so much more in the world that you can do and you can influence?
Yes. That was also very eye-opening, where it's like, I don't have to go the traditional path of like going to university to learn a new skill. I can teach myself, because I am naturally curious enough to kind of like make that happen. I was listening to an interview the other day with where they talked about when you get this new thing, and you're working for free, probably, right, with this new thing that you're doing, and they tell you like, hey, I need you to create this short video for Instagram that's going to work for our social media post tomorrow. Can you take care of that? And then you say, yeah, when in reality you have no idea what you're going to do about it. I mean, one of two. I feel like there's two types of people, right? Like the people who are going to like stay up until 2 a.m. Googling like what's an Instagram post and how do I like format it for this kind of stuff. And then there's the type of people who are going to be like, I don't know how to do this. And then like that's the end of the story. It's like, what do you mean you don't know how to do this and you're just going to sit there, right? Like there's all these resources available for you
there's no
to figure it out. There's no excuse. There's no excuse. And yeah, it definitely was like very eye-opening for me, where like, oh, I can teach myself this skill and then I can get paid for it because I've taught myself how to do this. Which is, again, talking about Asian parents, that's not how they think. They think like, what do you mean you're doing this thing that you taught yourself and you're making money doing it? Where it's like before, for them, it was like you go to school, you learn how to do this thing, you get a job for 20 years somewhere, and that's your life.
You die.
Yeah, then you die, or you retire, and your kids take care of you. Yeah, it's just a different.
It's crazy to
ideal.
think about it. You know how the world has changed so quickly.
Yep.
This last few years.
Yeah. I had a question here I was going to ask you. What is the best meal you've had in recent memory?
Best meal, recent memory. Oh,
if any.
that's tough. I don't think. Oh, I had a omakase.
Where?
With at Zilla Sushi.
Okay.
It's in Northeast Portland, and they brought in a full tuna, and they butchered it in front of all of us, and they had the swordsmen, like these craft swordsmen from Japan, actually there for the dinner.
Insane.
And it was just this crazy. I think the one thing, shoot, I forgot what it's called. It's like the gonads of I forgot what it's called. It has so much umami flavor. It's orange, and it's
not uni. Is it uni?
It's not uni. It's shoot, I'm gonna get pissed now that I don't know it. But it has such an umami bomb that it just melts in your mouth, and it has like that fishy taste, and oh crap,
that's awesome.
I forgot what it is.
Yeah,
it was great. Like, I think people should try omakase once, even if it's expensive. I think it ruins your experience at sushi belt restaurants. You can never eat there again.
Sure.
How about you? Do you have a meal that's like lifetime to you? That
lifetime?
Yeah.
So I never got to eat at El Bulli. And so when Next in Chicago did their El Bulli menu, a friend of mine got tickets for that, and I remember I flew from New York to Chicago just to have that meal, and I'm so glad I did, because it was like some of the last times that, the spherified olive and their fish that they serve on a bag of seashells, and like the salty carrot puree or the salty carrot foam thing, and all these things that like you see in the El Bulli books and that you read about that are never going to see the light of day again. Whether I mean, you can go to like Tickets in Barcelona and get some of these dishes, but like Ferran gave Grand Achatz the green light to serve this menu of El Bulli at Next, and I feel like it's not going to happen anymore. I mean, with Ferran not really cooking as much as that was a very, very special meal. My meal at Per Se after my externship was also like amazing, because I spent essentially 6 months prepping all this mise en place that I would rarely see on a finished dish, and then to finally see it all come full circle and experience a menu with my dad, by the way, who was like helping support me work for free at Per Se,
great,
so I got to eat with him, and he could finally see like all this stuff that I was saying that I was doing, working for free, come together in this meal in this amazing place. That was a very, very special meal. And then recently, I don't know, I feel like sometimes I can get jaded with a lot of the fine dining things, because a lot of times you're seeing things for like the third or fourth or fifth time, or you're seeing things where like I see what you're doing, but I see that you're doing it just for technique's sake, as opposed to actually trying to do something, or like what's the actual idea behind this dish. So more often than not, I get impressed by like the more simple things. My girlfriend and I went to Italy in January, and we went to this place where they don't even have a physical menu. The lady just tells you what they're cooking that day, and like you get to pick whatever you want to eat, and they'll just bring it to you, and it's amazing. And it was in Bologna, and the pasta was like so next level. Another meal that was really good fine dining wise was Jimbocho Den in Tokyo, because again, I was asking him about a fish, and he like brought us out one of the fish that they were like aging for 6 days in a special paper. I don't know. I feel like the things I look for in food now are very different than what I looked for when I was starting off. It's less about flashiness and more about like thoughtfulness and what do you
potato last night we ate.
Yeah.
Crispy skin potato from Deadshot. Shout out to Deadshot. Like that was crazy. That's like
nostalgia, right? Like it's not only the nostalgia, but it's like prepared in a way that actually is delicious. And I mean, it's
just like thought into it, not just like it's a festival food, but there's
totally
like, I need to make festival food that's gonna blow people's minds up.
Right. And it's like they were trying to do hot food I mean, it wasn't cold, but it was like, they were trying to make stuff happen, which was kind of cool, because I feel like it's really easy to mail it in with festival foods sometimes.
It's true.
Do the charcuterie on a cracker with mustard that they made in house or some shit.
I agree.
It is what it is. What other questions do I have for you?
Hit me with anything. Right?
I don't know if I have anything crazy for you. We got 5 minutes until our next thing.
Yeah. Let me think. Maybe I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like, what is your life advice then? Not talking about food or anything, but your advice to really pursue what you want.
Mm-hmm. It started off very backwards for me, right? Like I wanted to have a 3 Michelin-star restaurant. I wanted all the accolades. I wanted to be the best. I wanted the headline to come out that said best chef in the world or best chef in the U.S., Justin Khanna. You know what I mean? I wanted this to be this thing. And that kind of led me down this path of trying to stage at all these Michelin restaurants and work there and learn under these guys, because I knew that was the path that was before me, was this is how these guys got there. And that led me down to the path that I wanted. And when I got my externship at Per Se and I started working at French Laundry and all this stuff happened, I came to the realization that once I got behind the scenes, it was kind of like behind the curtain of Wizard of Oz. It was like, it wasn't that I was disappointed, it's that I got to see all the other shit that went along with having a place like that, and it wasn't necessarily exactly what I expected with success. And I don't know exactly what I thought was going to come if I got that restaurant, right? There's this great book that I have a video out on about Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy video, and it talks all about how you should not chase the job title or the awards or the accolades. You should chase the work and the process. And I feel like all these people that we've covered and talked about very much so preach that, because that's very much so where success and fulfillment comes from. And that's what I seek out now, is fulfilling work, not necessarily resume building work or the highest paying work. And I'm very aware, and you're probably very aware of this too, that we have a lot of years left in our life, and we have a lot of projects we can get accomplished if we really keep working at it. And so right now I'm trying to focus on like, what is the most impact I can make with where I'm at right now. And so for me, that is bettering the next generation of chefs, because I definitely feel like there's a lot of that talk of there's no good help these days, good cooks are hard to find. And I feel like not a lot of chefs are doing anything to help the next generation. And part of that is because they don't have the time, right? Like, how am I to ask someone who owns a restaurant and cooks on the line 6 days a week to put out content on the internet, like write articles and just on your free time, do this thing, to like better the next generation. So while I'm not working in a restaurant right now, I want to take this time to give back and put something into the world that, I mean, back to like what Gary Vaynerchuk talks about with like legacy. I feel like a lot of chefs are sometimes applauded to the number of people that they've influenced in the professional space, right? Like Thomas Keller is seen as successful because Corey Lee has Bennu and Grant Achatz has Alinea, and all these people have all these places, and they worked under Thomas Keller, right?
And he's very humble about it too. He
totally,
never
never
boosts his ego about it.
Not for ego's sake, but I think that there can be another chapter where I can say, I'm a firm believer that there's this guy based up in Seattle, actually, Chase Jarvis. He's a photographer, and he talks about the fact that the single university on your resume is no longer going to be a thing in a couple of years. No one's going to go around saying, I went to Harvard. People are going to have all of these other influences that have shaped who they are. And I think that if I can have, in the next 15 to 20 years, when we see that roster of the best chefs doing stuff in the game, I would like a large majority of them to be able to say that following my stuff and listening to the content that I put out influenced them in a positive way, right? Where I don't want to be anyone's go-to, I learned under Justin Khanna kind of thing, because it's a fallacy to think that that's a reality where like I have this kitchen and only 8 people come and cook with me and I don't pay them very well and they cook all these hours and then they go off and they do their own thing. I would much rather be able to say that And it's not even like, I don't even want it to be like the best chefs in the world say that. I mean, I would like to have a certain number of them be impacted in a positive way, but I also know that like if that happens, there's going to be the trickle down, and everybody like under that, there's going to be hundreds of people who have gotten positively influenced in a way where it's like, you're not chasing stars for stars' sake. You're not, you're treating your staff with respect in a way that's sustainable. All this stuff that you and I are both super passionate about, it's about like drilling it into the head of a chef. You know, like I have this thing that I'll say sometimes where it's like, when it is cool to be a nice, empathetic chef, like when the best chef in the world is also really nice and empathetic and preaches hard work, then people will aspire to that. But for right now, it's kind of like the coolest chefs are the ones that are walking around at all these festivals with nice shoes, or they have the best restaurant on the San Pellegrino list, which doesn't always come with positive things.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, I just think that people, and one of the reasons why I do this interview show, to interview people like you and the knife makers and the farmers and all these people, is to show that, you know, when I started off, the only path to success was to have a Michelin-starred restaurant. And now that I've seen the other side, I know that that's not the case.
And the same thing for me when it came to education. People thought you'd be successful, you have to go to college.
Right.
Not saying you shouldn't, but now we live in a world where if you want to do something successful and you take the risk, the opportunities are out there.
Precisely. So why pigeonhole yourself to think that there's this one path when there's so many? And yeah, I think that it's toxic to think that you have to go down this one path to have success. But back to the place where I started this story, because I had this idea in my head that I was going to have this 3 Michelin-star restaurant, I went like so far down this road, and then I could see that it wasn't right and turn around and go a different direction. But I had all these things that I learned from having worked at these places, which now I can then leverage for this next chapter. So that's been very, very valuable. So my advice that I try to tell people is to like get that North Star and push towards it, rather than trying to be all scatterbrained and whatever. Because at the end of that road, if you pivot, you're going to be able to do something else. I mean, we talk about like these NBA guys shooting media, and you with food and media, right? Like someone could tell you like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean you're doing media? You should do something food related, because then you can use all your food experience to affect this next thing. And it's just not the case anymore. I feel like if you're successful in writing books, you can then go be a musician, and no one's saying no. Like no one's going to hold you back from doing that.
Exactly.
It's just if your head's on straight. I don't know. That's my advice. I don't know.
No, we got to go to this next event.
Yeah, we got to go to this
next
event.
I want to make just one last comment.
Yeah.
I think no matter what in life, you have to chase what makes you happy. You have to say yes to the things that make you happy and say no to the things that you just don't want.
Totally.
I think people are really scared to say yes to the things that scare them. And I think fear is like one of the greatest things that people set for us to make us not do what we love to do. And I think anything in life, you just have to chase it.
Totally.
And we're here in this really nice ass hotel right now, doing a podcast, and the effort and the work you put into it is the output you're going to get. So you just have to keep doing it and just, like you say, chase that North Star, don't give up. And even if you get there, find a different universe. Maybe there's aliens on Mars or something. I don't know, just go beyond and above.
Yeah. I appreciate you being on the show, man. This has been fun.
Thanks for having me, man.
Of course. Hey, future Justin here. No outro or IGTV takeaways section this time. I'm doing a bit of an experiment with the next couple of episodes. I don't want to put in all of that extra editing work if you're already going to listen to the podcast anyways. And so I'm going to see how statistics look like for this episode. If because of the lack of IGTV takeaway video views, it's not saying it's not getting views. It just, I want to see what the numbers look like and see if there there are other ways that my time can be spent, whether it's in increasing the production quality here, or maybe taking tidbits of this episode that I think are really valuable, putting subtitles on them, and then repurposing those for something like IGTV or Twitter. I don't think you're necessarily missing anything with this interview by me not doing the takeaways section either. I got very comfortable with Mike. We were able to have a very real one-on-one conversation, and so there's a couple times in the interview where I actually disclose what the takeaways from those sections are. So I think the interview is good enough to stand on its own, and if it's something that you missed, please share your feedback with me on Twitter or Instagram. Shout out to everybody also supporting the show on Patreon. Details for that are in the description or info tab of whatever podcast platform you're listening to, or right below the video on YouTube. Speaking of the audio-only fam, I had someone tell me at an event the other day that she loves the show and she listens because she randomly found it on iTunes, which tells me that all of your positive reviews are working. So if you really want to show the show some love in an absolutely free way and make sure people can find us, I would really appreciate a positive review. If you decide you'd like to leave a negative review, please add some constructive criticism or feedback in that review so I can continue to improve. Okie dokie, that was a long one. I always appreciate your ears. Until next time, my name is Justin Khanna. Roll the outro. Thanks for listening to the Emulsion podcast. I appreciate your ears more than you know. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help sponsor the show, head on over to patreon.com/Justin Khanna. Other ways you can help out right now include giving this show a review on iTunes so more people can find it. I also love seeing you folks liking and commenting on the video if you listen that way, or even just share this episode with a friend. Now's normally where I would tell you that my name is Justin Khanna and I hope you have a good one, but you've probably got another podcast episode to listen to, so I'm just gonna get out of the way here. Excuse me.